This is the Instigators, presented by Seneca Resorts and Casinos. Nothing else comes close.
We are going to overtime!
Oh, Marty, I'm sure most producers don't love it when the game goes to overtime because they've had long days to begin with in the production truck with the entire team that makes the broadcast come to life. Our focus in this episode of Instigators Overtime will be with Buffalo Sabres producer Joe Pinter. But I'm wondering if you have a little, television production behind the scenes story heading into this.
Okay. So Joe's fantastic, by the way. Love working for him, and he'll have a lot of RJ stories. But so producers have to keep a tight ship. They have a time specific to certain elements, and they have commercial breaks they have to hit, and there's so many things they have to go. And so we have our IFB, which is basically a earpiece that the producers can talk to us while we're talking. Mm-hmm. You know what's the producer's favorite word for me?
Wrap it up.
Wrap it up. Wrap it up, Marty. Wrap, Marty. 5 seconds. Wrap it up, Marty. Wrap. Like I want to talk. I want to get my thoughts out there. And sometimes it takes me time. Wrap it up. So much so that it wasn't Joe, but it was producer JJ, who one time was like, Marty, you'll have one quick thoughts. You're asking me a question, Duffer. And before I even said any words, he says, wrap it up. I'm like, I haven't even said anything, and I'm already being told to wrap it up. So to all the producers out there, and mostly to Joe, thank you for being kind and not yelling at me in my ears.
It is rather amusing to me, and at the same time, unknowingly when we're in the moment. But how often people have commented after the fact, either on Twitter or personally, they say, do you ever get a word in? You should see the look on your face when Marty's talking. You look like you want to say something and you never have a chance. And I'm like, sometimes it does. Most times it doesn't feel like that, but just so you know, that's the impression you're leaving, Marty.
I want to say the only reason it doesn't feel like that to you is because you're already thinking and you're researching and you're thinking about what's coming up next. And Joe's probably talking to you saying, okay, we got Tage Thompson warm-up shot coming up. So you're already thinking about that. So you've tuned me out. So good on you to have tuned me out now for the amount of years we've worked together.
Entirely not true, but on occasion, yes. And as I encourage him all the time, I tell Joe, talk to me more. Talk to me more. And when you're serious about the game, bet on Buffalo at the only sports books in Western New York. Seneca Resorts and Casinos betting counters are open daily, and self-service betting kiosks are available 24/7 at all three locations. So whether you visit Seneca Niagara, Allegheny, or Buffalo Creek, the Sports Lounge features the latest lines and multiple screens so you never miss a play. The Sportsbook at Seneca Resorts and Casinos, where the love of the game meets the thrill of the win. And now, Buffalo Sabres television producer Joe Pinter. Joe, I'm sure that when the opportunity first came around to start working with the legend, Rick Jeanneret, it must have been quite the feeling and opportunity you were presented with.
Oh, that's an understatement, Duffer. Basically, I was my first professional run-in with Rick was in I think it was the early 90s when I worked my first, I think I've told you guys the story of this before. I worked my first home game as Ted Darling's AD up in the booth, in the television booth. And I had Ted Darling to my left. I was here, and I had Rick to my right with the little partition between us doing the radio call. And it was an incredible night. This 23-year-old kid from Angola, New York, sitting in a broadcast booth with Ted Darling to his left and Rick Jeanneret to his right. And the great thing about the night was the two of them have such incredible, distinctive, their own play-by-play calls. And I've got Ted Darling, who I'm listening to in my earphones here, and I've got Rick, who I can hear through the partition. And I kept on looking back and forth, wondering which game these two guys were watching because they were such distinctive, different calls.
So since you kind of worked with both of them, which one was more as a producer, like active talking to you, and which one is just let him be? Or is there similarities, or are they very much different, just like their calls?
Well, back then, Marty, when Ted was doing play-by-play for TV, there really wasn't much of a talk back. there was very little communication behind the scenes like that. That technology developed later on in the 90s and the early 2000s. But either way, neither one of them, Rick to this day, still very little communication when the play is going on between us, unless he's hopping on to tell me a joke.
Oh, he's got to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Nah, I want to know about the jokes. I mean, can you share any of them? Does he have recurring ones?
Yeah. No, I can't share that one. I can't. He would. Rick was a master at taking players' names and having fun with it. So since we're broadcasting this, let's see if I can tell you. All right. So say a guy's skating down the ice, and right in the middle of his call, Rick would always have a funny little catch on the guy's name. So the guy would literally be skating down the ice and would say, and so-and-so down the left wing, and then he'd get in my ear and say his nickname and then continue his call without missing a beat.
And see, when you say that to me, like, not that the audience would ever imagine that that's happening, but then when you think of how he ends up punctuating plays, just with, you know, he has an attachment, he has a way of making that player more than just the name in the moment, right? I mean, it's I don't know, it's kind of all of, it's a very good snapshot of what he is and the joy that he gets out of what he's doing.
Right. The one that I can say on the air is like Stu Grimson. He always called him the Grim Reaper. So if anything happened with Grimson in the corner, he'd get in my ear and say, the Reaper's out tonight. You know, but the amazing thing was it would not miss a beat. It'd be right in the middle of his call. Nobody would have any idea except for me, because we had the two-way communication.
Now, RJ called the game basically play by play. He's got the excitement in the voice. He's describing the play just like you can close your eyes and see what's happening. But at any moment, as you just, are talking about, he can talk to you and nobody can hear it. Any time that he thought he pressed the button and it went over the air and probably shouldn't have had?
Not too many. There was probably a few, but nothing that was any, offensive or anything like that. A few may have slipped, but no, not pretty much. No. That's
okay. What about Razor?
That's another story.
We'll save that for his retirement night.
Yeah.
Was RJ, I mean, I almost, it's obviously my opportunity to come work with you, and RJ and the entire crew came much later in life, but I can certainly, speak to the feeling of seeming like a 23-year-old standing next to icons in the business. How quickly did it become normal for you, where you lost that should I be here, or what am I doing here kind of feeling, and then it was just like, you could feel a friendship and a working partnership, growing together?
Well, probably about 10 years after I started producing for him. So maybe about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And RJ was great right from the beginning, as was Ted Darling. I couldn't have been luckier to meet these two guys on a personal level. And Rick was great. My first year producing for him was 2002. And Lowell McDonald was the producer I took over for, who still to this day is one of the best in the game. And that was Rick's first run at television, because he had done 25 years of just radio. So he was maybe 6 years into television doing play-by-play, and I had started producing. And, it was difficult for both of us because we were both still relatively new. But to answer your question, the time for me to get comfortable where I could, be comfortable with the legend, like, it probably took a good 10 years to just where, I considered him, I wasn't in awe of him as much anymore, I guess. I was still in awe, but I wasn't intimidated or scared. And he, of course, gave me no reason to be intimidated or scared. I just was.
Well, you guys traveled a lot together. I mean, doing all the games and getting on the plane, getting on the bus after games. What was RJ like on the road? Like, the game's over and he's getting his things, and then, like, what happens now? Like, where is he first on the bus? Does he sit in the back of the bus? Does he sit in the front? What's his demeanor on the bus after a win, after a loss? What was he like on the road?
First man on the bus, front seat, right behind the driver, always. There's a funny story that goes with that. But
now you guys have your own bus, right? So he's not taking the head coach's spot.
No, for years we traveled with the team. for years, we would travel with the team, the play-by-play color and myself and the director. We only had our own bus maybe the last 10 years or so.
Okay.
When we traveled with the team, we would have a certain spot on the bus. I believe it was the 5th row back is where we could start sitting. But when we had our own bus, he was, it was RJ's bus. He was the first guy on the bus. He sat in the front seat. He commented to everybody that got on the bus, good or bad, sarcastic or not. And you made me think of, I don't know if you guys were on the trip when like I said, RJ was always the first guy on the bus. So we're in Columbus, I believe it was. And Razor's on the bus, and I always would get there late because we were still on the air. So I get on the bus, Razor's on the bus, everybody's on the bus but RJ, and we're looking around saying, where's RJ? Nobody knows. But sorry, RJ, but all of a sudden Razor's phone rings. I guess all of our phones were ringing and nobody picked up, but Razor's phone rings and he picks up. RJ had locked himself in the bathroom on the bus. Were you guys on that trip?
No, I wasn't, but
I don't think I was on it for some reason, but I do recall hearing.
So he's in the back of the bus, locked in the bathroom.
We're all hooping and hollering because we had won. So we're up in the front of the bus having fun, looking for RJ. Nobody's answering their phones, and the door latched. The door latched on him, and he couldn't get it open.
So
like, did Razor have to kick it down? Like, what did he have to do? I just think of like an airplane bathroom where somebody has to use their shoulders to pop it open type
That's
thing.
what it was like, but it opened fine from the outside, just not from the inside.
Oh man.
And the irony of the story is a Washington Capitals player the next morning locked himself in a bathroom in a hotel.
Yes, Joel Ward.
Joel Ward.
Yeah.
And of course, that was the chatter the next morning because we were still on the road trip. So everybody was, comparing notes with RJ and Joel Ward.
Amazing. I remember reading about that and was thinking, oh my gosh, what a feeling. What else, like when you were getting to know RJ, what else stood out the more you got to spend time with him? Was there, because I think it's only natural, right? I mean, you think you've grown up listening to this voice, and then you presume you kind of know him, but then you start seeing a little more of him. What did you come to know?
Well, still to this day, I'm amazed at how nice of a guy he really is and how much he's such a giving person. And I mean, he always would be the guy that would organize the team dinners on the road. 2-3 times a year was RJ dinner night. Come on, guys, we're going to dinner. And he would sit in the corner and hold court, and we'd all go and eat. He wouldn't even eat until after we were all done eating. But just how nice and genuinely a good person he really is. And he's just a joy to be around, and his conversation's fantastic and the stories he tells. That's the thing I miss. I was just talking to Mike Harrington about his article a couple of weeks ago. I mean, the thing I miss the most about not traveling or COVID is time spent with not only you guys. I mean, I spent a lot of time with you guys regardless, but time spent with RJ on the road or at dinner and just sitting down, talking hockey, talking life, picking on each other.
Right now there's, this opening the opening of the season of Major League Baseball, the NBA basketball, the playoff push in NHL hockey. There's a million things going on. What would have been the topic of conversation with RJ? Because he always would talk sports and what's going on around the world. Is it more geared towards hockey or more geared towards something else but hockey?
Oh, it was almost always geared towards hockey. I mean, He watches a lot of hockey. We would talk a lot of hockey about hockey around the league. But, if there was a football game on or a horse race or anything, or even a dog track, I mean, his knowledge, I tell you, he's extremely bright. He's very smart, and his vocabulary is fantastic too, which is a whole nother story, but I'm getting sidetracked here. But yeah, it didn't really matter. It was basically hockey with RJ, but it was anything. He loves sports. And, the story is legendary how when he calls a game, he's got one monitor that's got the Sabres game on it, and then another monitor that's got whatever else is on TV. So as soon as the whistle blows when Rob Ray's trying to talk, RJ's just watching whatever else game is on.
Yeah, the more you guys were speaking there, the more it was reinforcing why I think Razor and RJ have been a good fit on the air and their banter over the years. Because when you dive into those moments where it's behind the scenes at dinner time and on the bus and things like that, for all the kidding that we do with one another, and usually Razor instigates a lot of it. But, you know, I have always found Rob to be quite worldly. Like he's interested in a lot of things, right? And he tries to soak that in. And RJ is the same way. So I can imagine, you know, it could feel like it's repetitive being on the road, you know, drop the bags to the hotel, sit down, have dinner, whatever. I think those two probably just have a real knack for meaningful conversation. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree, absolutely. And it was repetitive, but it was never the same.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
sure,
That's a really good way to put it, because I mean, you just said exactly what Marty and I have said multiple times. Like, we miss going into the arena and sitting down for dinner at the table that has reserved for RJ on it inside, you know, KeyBank Center. Like, but all of us felt the same way. It was whoever showed up there, they were lucky to have that moment or two sitting down with RJ before everybody else arrived. It's pretty cool.
And you know, the routine was similar, especially for Razor and RJ. We'd get to the hotel, we'd do our thing, and you know, they'd go together. I'd do my thing, they'd do their thing, and then we'd usually meet up about 8, 9 o'clock at night. That's the way it was. If we didn't go out together for dinner, we would meet up at 8 or 9 o'clock at night at whatever gin mill the two of them were hanging at, just to touch base, say hello, see who was going to get picked on that night, and you know, see who showed up. Have RJ yell at you for not buying him a beer, and then he wouldn't let you buy one if you tried.
Right.
You know.
That's RJ. You talk about Razor, and you got to work with Harry Neal, you got to work with Jimmy Lawrence, you got to work with a bunch of their color guys. So any one or particular story between RJ and one of his color guy that stands out that you're like, man, that should go down in a book?
There might be one or two that I shouldn't repeat.
Well, that's why we got you on, because people want to know those type of stories.
Yeah. When are you going to tell them, Joe? I mean, if not now, never, right? Come on.
All right. Well, I do have to apologize to RJ again for this one, but there was a time when RJ got cut off during the middle of a fight call that he wasn't real happy at. Because as you know, when RJ, you know, when he's doing it's RJ and he was starting, and he got ramped up and started his call, and the color announcer interrupted and said something, and Rick was not very happy about that.
So did it go quiet?
It went quiet for a couple.
It went very quiet.
The announcers were laying out to let the you know, the moment breathe.
Hey, but what about, like, I think everybody has such fond memories of Jim Lawrence working with RJ. In your position, how often did you find yourself just listening to them?
Quite often, especially early on, because as with Razor, when Lorenzo and Rick were working together, Rick had an incredible amount of respect for him as a player. So not because of that, but in addition to that, when he comes to be the broadcaster, I think there was a better some sort of a bond there, that Lawrence was a famous Sabre, and now he's working with Rick. And I think Rick really, I think that was special for Rick. And so those, especially early on, those guys were great, and they had an incredible chemistry. And when I first started in the business and I was still getting my teeth wet, I sat back often and just would get lost in the moment and listen to two of them during a stoppage in play. And, you know, and early on, they were both extremely helpful too, and for me to do my job. So I did take a lot of direction from them early on.
I mean, I used to go to the NHL broadcast meeting, even as a player. I would go, they'd invite me, we'd talk to all the broadcast teams, you know, regional and national. And then I went obviously as a broadcaster after, and they always talked about how the play-by-play is changing. It's not so much of a play-by-play, it's more of a storytelling, and you have to do it for the audience. Was there ever a conversation or a time where somebody came to RJ and said, "Oh, listen, RJ, you have to change the way you call the game," or was it always like, we let him do what he does because he's the great Hall of Famer, Rick Jeanneret?
When Rick was hired to do television in the mid 90s, 95, 96 by Doug Moss and Jennifer Smith, the edict was, you do your call, you do your play call. And to my knowledge, and I'm sure he'd say the same thing, he didn't change a thing.
Yeah.
Rick does his play call. It's the same call he's done for 50 years. He did not change a thing. He may have adapted a little bit here and there, but his basic call, and like you said, Marty, he's old school. When the play-by-play is doing the call, he wants to do the call. He wants to call the game. He doesn't want to tell stories. That's all done at the whistle. But no, I'm sorry, go ahead, Duffer.
No, it's just amazing, isn't it? How sometimes when you step back and think about what you just said like that not everything needs to evolve the way people on the, periphery think it needs to evolve, because quite frankly, there's nothing wrong with the way Rick has ever called the game.
No, and not that it was a bad idea, but there was a league initiative to be more storytelling. And the problem is that our audience was used to the way Rick Jeanneret called the game. So if Rick would have started telling stories, people would have been mad. And getting back to the way that you were, the first thing you said about how the game, the position has changed. To this day, Rick Jeanneret shows up to do a hockey game with a lineup card and nothing more. No other notes, nothing. He's got a lineup card only because he doesn't know a couple players on the other team's number. He wants to refer to that. He knows probably 2/3 of the other team. There's a couple guys he's not sure, but he shows up with a lineup card. No game notes, no written notes, no nothing. A lineup card.
Yeah,
that's
pretty
unheard of.
That's unheard of, because I remember two of the best in the business that I know of, Sam Rosen and Kenny Alberts. They both work for the New York Rangers. So I'd be on the plane, walking up and down the aisle of the plane, and I'd see Kenny Alberts with this fold out piece of paper in front of him, right? And he was preparing for a football game, but it is numbers and players and notes and all of that, because those guys do football, they do baseball, they do hockey. But even when it's a hockey game, they put their books in front of them, and they have the player's name, where they're from, their stats from last year, where they played junior or college. They have all of it. And you're right, RJ, it's not that he's not going to use that information, and he knows all that information, but he doesn't have to have it in front of him. He's done it so long that he knows what information to retain and what information people don't want to know, which is pretty amazing to see. Duffer and I, we put too much time into preparation, so we need to be a little bit more like RJ, maybe.
Well, you color coordinate, Marty, so you even take it another further. I can barely read my own writing, so that causes its own problems as we go along. And
yeah,
honestly, though, I think that's probably, Joe, what I've learned most about RJ is how much he still loves the game, and therefore still watches the game and still interacts with people around the game. So anything that's coming out of his mouth during the broadcast, other than the natural excitement of the play, is stuff that he's had conversations about or observations personally about. So he trusts his own instincts. And again, those are wonderful traits to pass on to people that are coming along in the business. Like, it can't just be lifting something off of a page over here and trying to bring it to life. Like, you have to have real life interactions and experiences here to share with people.
That's a good point, Duffer. And on top of that, he's got the vocabulary to say it in a concise, meaningful, direct way. I mean, his crossword puzzles, that was another thing that I noticed when I first started working with him, were his crossword puzzles. He'd take the New York Times Sunday crossword puzzle on a bus, put his glasses on, wouldn't say a word for 20 minutes, and he'd be done. And he probably did them every day. I don't think he does them as much anymore, but just the crossword puzzles he used to do and his vocabulary.
And that's what blew me away on RJ's banner night, was for as well read as he is and doesn't often convey much about music. When he cited Neil Diamond, I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? This is the last person that I was going to think would lift some lyrics off of a page. But again, that's RJ, right? He always has that element to give you something that you wouldn't necessarily expect.
That's well put there.
Yeah. What about all the shenanigans pregame, the dressing up? I mean, we did old geezer night the other day, and RJ let Duffer know and Razor, and then we kind of all talked about it. And then I said, well, maybe somebody's got to tell Joe about this because, and then we're all like, well, we're only going to tell him, but like a few hours before the game so that nothing gets squashed because RJ, we can't say no to RJ. So, but him and Jim Lawrence did some dressing up. There's a time where he brought Irish dancers up in the broadcast booth and had the little dance going on. Like, as a producer, has it happened often that he's come to you, or was it always, yes, RJ, you can do whatever you want? How did that all work out?
It's probably 50-50. A good number of these, especially early on, were his ideas. And he told me about all of them before we went to air, but they were usually his idea. And he'd come to the rink saying, hey, this is what I'd like to do tonight. Even the simple stuff back with Jim Lawrence maybe was a little bit more coordinated, but he was always looking to do something fun like that. You know, if we were in Florida and we're next to, like, behind one of the rinks in Florida, there's a little pond that's got alligators in it. So we went out there one day and shot an open next to the pond. But he always wanted to do stuff like that. Most of the time, if not all the time, it was his idea. And I don't think he ever had anything that was, we had to say, no, we shouldn't do that. They're all good ideas. Mm-hmm. And we've done, well, you saw the one reel that we ran on RJ night.
Yeah.
Hundreds of him dressing up and, you know, Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny.
Frankenstein was good.
Yeah.
Hey, what did you think sitting in the position you were in, observing RJ's banner night, knowing how long you've known him and just what the building felt like, and what did you feel and see that night?
Oh, I was just overwhelmed and extremely happy with the way it was received by the fans and the reception fans gave him. I wish it could have gone on for another hour. I would have loved to see the fans stand and just give him a standing ovation for 30 minutes. But it was really, I felt really, really good for him. You know, I'm sad as sad can be. I mean, that'll take a while for me to get over, but for him, it was really, I had a great feeling for him. For me, I'm bittersweet, but it was so cool to see what him in the moment. He got a little choked up. It was special.
Well, people in the stands got to either see it live or kind of peeking at the Jumbotron to see a closer look to what RJ's doing. On TV, we got to see what you guys put out there, but you're in the truck and you have gosh knows how many screens, right? And camera angles, and you've got his family in the suite on one TV. You've got RJ, you've got Razor, you got the alumni, you got the fans. Like, you got to see it in such an overall way. What moment did you think was either the one that got people emotionally hooked on what was happening?
I don't think it was when he first walked out. It was probably when maybe it was when he first walked out, when he got the first ovation and they didn't stop. I think that's probably when the tear ducts opened up a little bit for me the first time. So I think it was when things started to settle down and then the crowd kept on going and wouldn't stop cheering the first time, is when it was really, that's when I had to sit back and let everybody else carry the show, because I had to collect myself a little bit.
It was amazing. And I almost feel, I don't know. I have a feeling that you've been counting this down more just because you have to. Like, you're, I don't know. You're probably just more in tune with each of his individual games remaining. And I, you know, Marty and I are on the air every day and we're always talking about this, that, and the other thing. And it's only hitting me now, which I feel guilty of saying, but it's really hitting me this week right now. Like, once we turned the corner this weekend, and then it was like, oh my God, there's 4 games left and there's only 2 for RJ. And I don't know whether I've just been in denial the whole time and not wanting to focus on it, but now it's starting to be, I mean, you just use bittersweet. It's almost becoming uncomfortable because, like, nobody wants it to end. Right. So you know, and it was also a weird dynamic on RJ night too, because I remember turning to you, Marty, off air, and it's like, we got to save something for RJ's last night too. And I don't even want to think about that, but like, you still have to, I don't know. I don't even know. You're already looking ahead to the final game, I'm sure, but I think we all don't want to either.
I dread it. I'm looking ahead, but I don't want to. No, I don't want that day to happen.
Yeah.
Plain simple.
I was talking to him the other night, and again, these are the moments like we used to have at the dinners before the game. And so I went up to the broadcast location in the press box before last game because I had a picture for Mitch Korn, good old Mitch Korn. He's coming in next Saturday when the Islanders are in, and he had a picture he wanted RJ to sign, and he doesn't want to bother him on Saturday. So he's like, can you get it signed beforehand? And I said, absolutely. So I went up and I ended up sitting in, the broadcast booth for about 20 minutes and just, chatting with RJ and talking whatever. And we were talking about the fact that Chicago is in on the last game, and Pat Foley, Chicago Blackhawks play-by-play guy, is also retiring. And they did a ceremony just last week. And RJ was like, oh, I was hoping that Pat was going to be in town and we could go together, but he's not doing that game. And he was almost angry at that. Like, I'm thinking, hey, like, has he talked to you or talked to you, Duffer, about his last game? Has he opened up as to what that's going to be like? Because I got a little insight as to almost what he was like in his mind thinking at next Friday, the 29th, when it's the last game. But I don't think that he's happy about it. Like, it's so weird. Then he goes into, well, I'm tired now. I'm going to be 80 years old. I'm tired now. So like, there's like a bittersweet even to him about that date, right?
I don't think he's really grasped yet what he's going to do on the 29th. I don't think he really in his mind knows how he wants to handle that yet. I talk to him not daily, but quite often, and I don't push him, of course, ever. And we just discuss what we're thinking. And I mean, we're going to have a little promotion for this weekend for the game on the 23rd. We're going to have his two sons doing color commentary, so to speak, with him in the booth all game.
Yeah.
So that's what his focus is on now. He's really worried about how that's going to go and how we're going to integrate Razor into the broadcast and so on and so forth. So he's a little bit, that's where his thoughts are now. And I think once that day's over, he'll have 6 games or 6 days to really figure out how he wants to say goodbye. But it might not be an easy thing for him, I would guess.
It's so funny because he was talking about that. He goes, no, next game, I got my 2 sons. We can't have a camera here. We don't have enough room. Like, we can't have, no, you guys are going to be like, he's very like adamant that like, this is the next thing on his mind. Now, you're right. That is, and I can't wait to hear that, because what an opportunity and a special feeling would it be to be able to do that job with even, one child, but his 2 sons being over there. That I can't wait to hear what that sounds like. It's going to be amazing.
I always remember in '99 when we lost to Dallas in the Cup Finals, and we weren't traveling at the time, so it was radio only because it was a national TV broadcast. And I just remember when we were talking to Rick about how we wanted to handle the doing the color play-by-play and color on the road, and he said, it's the Stanley Cup Finals. I'd like to have my 2 sons in a booth with me. So they both did stats for him back in '99. So it's been a long time coming that he hasn't had another Stanley Cup Finals. So his second last game, it'll be nice to have his sons up there with him.
RJ has mentioned this story before, and those who witnessed it certainly remember it. And it kind of ties in with just the whole RJ night and seeing Ryan Miller as part of the tribute video. But were you there when it ended against Carolina and RJ had that moment after the game where he had been going around and thanking the players for their run? And
No.
he talked about getting in front of Ryan Miller and the 2 of them welling up with emotion. And I think what's beautiful about that is just seeing Ryan in this tribute video to RJ on his night. Like, Ryan comes across as so genuine in that I could only imagine what the raw emotion was like between these 2 guys that cared so much, and the way it came to an end against Carolina.
Yeah, I wasn't there. Well, I wasn't there, unfortunately. And you make me think about Ryan. Ryan was is a special person. He's, there's been hundreds and hundreds of players that have come through that door that I've interacted with. And he's definitely one of the one of the more special ones as far as a person and caring and connecting with you. And so that had to be a nice moment for RJ. I wish I could have witnessed that, but we lost. So I'm kind of glad we didn't.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about RJ using nicknames in the middle of a call. And because you talked about Ryan, and that was kind of like my last years, and I had some good years, but I also had some games that were a little tougher. At any moment, did RJ ever, like, a goalie gives up a goal, it's a bad goal, and he goes, oh, shoot, scores, and then he presses the button, he goes, well, that was brutal, and then comes back, like, is it? And if you do remember one about me, please share. I want to know if I was ever the conversation point when I gave up a bad goal.
All the time, Marty. And it wasn't just goalies, it wasn't just you. It could be anybody. If he didn't like something, he would, even last game, what was the last game he did? Was it the
St. Louis?
Philadelphia Saturday
game when we were down 2-0?
Yeah. Early. Right. Yeah.
After the second goal, as soon as they scored, I don't even think he was doing his goal call. He hopped down and said, oh my God, this is horrible.
Okay, well, let's flip it around to a game you remember the most for all the right reasons working with RJ. Any night where you just, it just jumps off the page.
Yeah, there's got to be many, but the one that jumps off the page is the win against the Rangers in the 06 playoffs, the Chris Drury goal, then a Finneganoff. We had about 5,000 people outside that were watching the game live in the pavilion area. And we've had this discussion before, Duffer, the great Chris Drury goal call. And right after the game, I mean, it's crazy. One of the best times in the history of this franchise. And after the game, I'm talking to Rick. I'm like, that was just an incredible call on the Drury goal. You laid out, you built the anticipation, and then he says, Pinto, I didn't know who scored. I said, what do you mean? He says, I didn't know who scored. So I had to delay and say, Buffalo scores, Buffalo scores. So just to hear that afterwards, and that might be my favorite goal call of all time. And he didn't know who scored, and he made it. I've listened to thousands of goal calls, and that might be my favorite one ever. And he didn't even know who scored right away.
Is he the only one that calls you Pinto? Or is this your nickname? Because every time, like the other night, I'm up there and he goes, I got to talk to Pinto about it. And I'm laughing because we always say Joe. Like, you are Joe to us. And we always say Joe, but he calls you Pinto.
Yeah, that's probably been going on for about 25 years. I don't know where it came from. I don't know. I don't think too many other people call me that. In fact, maybe nobody, but he's called me that for at least 25 years.
I think Razor does every now and again, but that's probably just because he's around RJ, right? Oh.
Yeah, he calls me a few things also.
Yeah, same. As a matter of fact, it reminds me of what Razor called me on air for about a year or so before you finally told him to stop calling me.
Yeah, I remember that too. that was kind of the fun of those little get-togethers at lunches when all of us were there. We didn't know who was going to be the target of those two at any given night. It could be me, it could be Marty, could be you, could be Razor.
I'll tell you what,
I've taken a lot of abuse, and I won't call it abuse. It's fun banter from Razor, and but now I've after years now, I've started to pump up my chest a little bit more, and I give it to him a little bit more than I used to. I was a little bit scared. One player, Joe, you talk about one player that Razor used to always pick on. And he didn't know how to handle it, and would likely just go sit in the stall, is Brian Campbell. You like Soupy. You've always talked about him. Game one of the 06 playoffs against the Flyers, overtime, Soupy hits RJ Umberger. The building's going crazy. What do you remember about that? And RJ in that moment, trying to always walk the line between the guy is hurt on the ice, but oh my gosh, what a hit. I need to build it up.
Oh, that was a great call. That was another great moment in the history of the franchise. That basically solidified Brian Campbell's career, right?
Yeah.
The call, RJ, I think, in retrospect, I think he knew the significance of all of that when it happened. And I don't remember the exact call. I do remember bits and pieces, but not the exact call. But the thing I remember most about it is it seemed to me that when it happened, RJ knew exactly what it meant, not only for the game, but for the series and more importantly for Brian Campbell's career. It almost seemed like the way he called that, he knew that that was a very, very big moment in the, you know, I'm using the wrong word here, but he saw that was, you know, it was oh boy, what a great play that was too.
That's a, you know, his ability to either completely encapsulate a moment or, you know, almost foreshadow what might come after it without saying it is amazing. And honestly, Joe, like the whole Mayday call, I wasn't able to hear it live. And yet when I did hear it for the first time in its entirety, I am still as blown away by the second part of that call as the Mayday part itself. Because RJ in that moment wrapped up 10 years of frustration for everybody and succinctly put, how do you spell off to La Belle Province? How do you spell second round? It was just, oh my, that's exactly what everybody's thinking. Like, finally, they've broken through and we're on to the next round. But it was the way he said it. And again, like, there's just, I don't know. I don't even know how you describe it. He just has it, right?
Yeah, he does have it. And he just even the simple, the most boring, slow, sluggish games, his call doesn't change.
Right.
It could be an absolutely horrible game at a snail's pace on the ice that you're looking at going like this, but his call, his energy is always there. His call is always there. He's still inflecting the hits in the corner. He's still acting like it's game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. There's no boring game ever that he calls, ever.
And the favorite one I saw on social media a few months ago was, and it's still not out of the zone, which applies 30 times a game. And he still manages to catch your attention in a game where nothing's happening. And it's like, oh, well, I need to pay attention.
I don't know how that works, Joe, and maybe you can explain this to us. I think almost of you guys in the truck, like, a guitarist, like where they can turn their sound up, like they have a knob that they can turn it up. Is there ever a time where RJ's level got so high into a game because the game got so intense and he kept mounting the volume that you guys had to turn him back a little bit in the truck because it was coming across too loud?
Yeah, they put limiters on, yes, they put a limiter on, I don't know the technical details, but yes, they have a piece of equipment that makes sure he doesn't get overmodulated, and because he would sometimes he'd be screaming, you know.
Okay, I need to ask you about this. This doesn't come up often other than typically in private conversations. What was it like for you? And I'm sharing this because it was really personal for me as kind of, someone still relatively new. What was it like for you the night that RJ and Jim Kelly were on the ice together on Hockey Fights Cancer Night, and then each of them individually sat with us for a long interview, as both at that time were saying that they were cancer free? Now, as we all learned, they both still had a lot of miles left on the journey to get to better health. But that moment to me it's a huge RJ and Jim moment.
I mean, I'm a big Bills fan, as you know, and I actually did get our present quarterback mistaken with the previous quarterback and John Kelly and Jim Kelly the other day. But so it was a special night for Jim Kelly because I was such a big fan of him. But that was a tough time for everybody when Rick was sick, and it was emotional, encouraging, to see the way that but that was, I haven't thought about that in a long time, Duffer. That was a scary time, a tough time. But when he came out for that Hockey Fights Cancer and then he returned to work shortly after, I mean, it was almost like starting again with RJ. It was almost like the first however many years that we had together were those. And now after this life-changing event and, what had happened, it was almost like it's the new beginning of the rest of his career almost.
Well, he was
all that.
kind of on a plan to retire, right? He was on a 3-year plan, like gonna wean himself off, and then that was gonna be it. And then the cancer diagnostic happened. And then after his treatments, he's like, no, I'm not stepping away. I'm doing this. That had to be, in a sense, like, oh, like, we're so happy that he's healthy, but again, we're so happy that he's going to continue to call the games.
Working, sure. I mean, we were all worried for him, obviously, and the fact that he not only came back and beat that phase and beat his cancer, that he came back and worked, and he was as strong and as good as ever. And he, you know, that, how many years ago was that? It had to be close to 10 years now, right?
It's at least 7. Yeah. Maybe 8 or 9. Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. It really
just
is.
Because you've told so many stories about RJ that made him look, I don't want to say bad, but there's stories that you shouldn't tell. Just so the people at home understand how this all works. So a lot of time we're coming back from commercial in a post game or intermission, and you're going to tell Duffer or myself or both of us, we're going to come back with a scenic of Buffalo and goal call, and then we're coming back, and we'll go into our sponsored elements and whatnot. So last game against the Flyers, after the game, Josh Allen was in the Sabres locker room high-fiving everybody after the game. So just as we're coming back from commercial, you say to Duffer, Jim Kelly in the Sabres locker room. When we come back, Jim Kelly in the Sabres locker room. So give Duffer credit. When they showed Josh Allen on the Jumbotron many times, we saw Jim Kelly in the suite at the game. So Duffer has knowledge that Jim Kelly is at the game. I know Jim Kelly's at the game, but I'm like, okay. And how many times did you say Jim Kelly in the locker room before somebody realized, like, Josh Allen in the locker room?
At least 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And then right before we came back, I must have said Josh Allen about 10 times after that to correct myself.
Yeah. It was fun though. I diligently wrote down Jim Kelly on my notes in front of me just to make sure. And then it was like, no, we're going to Josh. But that must be, I don't know. It's all part of RJ. I think the fact that RJ loves sports so much that you must be enjoying this crossover and, this Bills Sabres tie-in that we see way more often now. It must be enjoyable for you, right?
Oh, I love it. I've worked for the Bills just as long as I've worked for the Sabres.
Yeah.
And the first however many years it was, they were 2 separate organizations. And unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of chemistry between the 2 at the time. And now that, thank God, the Pagulas have, owned both franchises and they've stabilized both franchises. This is a sports fan in Buffalo like me. It's my dream to have these 2 teams, one Buffalo, as we like to call it. Yeah, it couldn't be any better. I love it. It's great. Both of my teams are owned by the same people, and there's a lot of interaction between the 2 franchises.
How do you go about not, like, sometimes I find myself, oh man, what game was it, Duffer, the other day? Oh, the RJ night when we scored the first goal against Nashville. I've cheered so loud, or maybe even cheered for a goal from our broadcast location. And when the puck went in the net, Peyton Krebs, right? He gets the puck and he shoots it in. Mm-hmm. My fist is in the air. Yes. I'm like pumped. Like, I'm so happy. Like, yeah, we scored a goal. It's RJ night. Let's go get it. Right now, you are obviously, or have always been a Sabres fan and a Bills fan. You're in the truck. How hard is it not to get into, like, you're listening to RJ, you're into the game, you're riding the ups and downs? Like, how hard is it for you in your position to just stay constant and do the job?
It's not difficult, but I'm a fan first, Marty. I'll be honest with you. No matter what I'm doing for my job, I'm a fan first and foremost, and I love the team. I've loved the team since 1970. I've only worked for them since 88. So I've got 18 years of being a fan before I was an employee. And yes, something great happens, I'm jumping up and down. I'm happy. I'm hooting and hollering. The empty net goal we scored, Tage's empty net goal the other day, I remember just going like this in my chair, leaning back, and I get excited. The big goals, the big moments, I get a little bit more excited. But yeah, because at that time when a goal is scored, you're excited. Then you hear Rick's call, and then that gets you going a little bit more. Then I do have to focus a little bit to see what replays we show and such, but it's pretty easy to Yeah, I'm a fan first. And, that made me just think of something. RJ's a fan first. And RJ, that's the thing. The hardest thing for me all these years doing this job when the team wasn't successful, as much as it bothered me as a fan, it really, really bothered Rick. Rick took losses and losing streaks and not making the playoffs personally. His love for this team is greater than any other love he has for sports. And he literally is a part of this team. And that was tough during a few of the dark years to get on the bus and talk to him and just see how much the losing took out of him.
Unless you have something else to add, which you might, I think that's a perfect way to end, because I was going to ask you, like I always do, one word. And I think fan is an appropriate word because he is one, and that's how he's connected with every single fan over the years. But if there's another word or two that you want to attach to RJ before we bid adieu, please.
The only word that comes to mind when I think RJ is just legend.
Yeah. All right. Don't look at the schedule, okay?
Today's an off day.
I know. Thank you for doing this on the off day. It's been great.
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate catching up. This is the stuff we cherish. We've all been lucky to be along for the ride, so to speak. Thank you, Joe.
And it was an honor for me to be on with you two guys. So thank you.
Thank you. Marty, that was a lot of fun. Joe, I would say politely, is relatively camera shy. So the fact that he was willing to sit down for as long as he did to discuss the man the way he did in Rick Jeanneret, that's a great gift to us because he offers a completely different perspective on things.
I love the story when he talks about Mr. Darling and Mr. Jeanneret calling the same game left and right of him, and they sounded so different, but they were both amazingly good at what they did. So I thought that was a great portrayal of both of the Sabres play-by-play legends.
And it leads us nicely, because you speak of amazingly good. We try to honor each and every week here on Instigators Overtime, those that have been going above and beyond and are star worthy. Now, obviously, RJ is always the number one star from our side of things in the media and on the broadcast side, but we're looking at it a little more player specific. Who have you got for your 3 stars this week?
Okay, so player specific, I'm going to go with my number one star, Jonathan Huberdeau.
You're starting at 1?
I'm going to start at 1. Yeah, well,
wow.
It's 3 stars. I'm not sure if it's the first, second, or third, but like one of my stars, Jonathan Huberdeau, who is only, as we speak right now, 2 points behind Connor McDavid in the scoring race in the National Hockey League. They both are at 75 games played, 110 points for Connor McDavid, 108 for Jonathan Huberdeau. Who would have thought that at the start of the season that Huberdeau was going to be 2 points behind McDavid? So I'm going with Huberdeau as one of my stars. The other star, one of my 3 stars, because I don't want to say second star, I'll get in trouble, is Spencer Knight, who has won his last 5 games,
nice.
3 starts, and he came in relief twice on Bobrovsky still to win the game. And right now, it looks like the goaltender that was picked in the first round by the Florida Panthers and was a star at the World Juniors and star in college, and now looks to be a star in the National Hockey League. So I'm going to say Spencer Knight is my second star. And the third star, because I've done this all year, I'm going to say the Florida Panthers, who at no point this year I thought were going to be able to catch the Colorado Avalanche. Well, just look at this. Florida has a game in hand on Colorado and are only 2 points back in the President's Trophy race. So Colorado losing to Washington on Monday night really hurt them in that race, but Florida could be the top seeded team when we start the playoffs on May 2nd.
Nicely done. No surprise. You always like to pull in one particular team. You could have mentioned Gustav Forsling and Sasha Barkov just to, appeal to my,
I could have mentioned
Panther
the
likings.
Lundell shorthanded goal where Barkov has got Mo Seider all draped over him and he looks behind and he does a drop pass on a shorthanded breakaway.
You know what's amazing about that play is, like, Barkov doesn't come up in the conversation of fastest skater, and he was literally standing still in the neutral zone, and Seider was on him from the moment he got the puck, and he still manages to travel whatever 80 to 180, probably 80 feet before he drops it off. You know, it was remarkable. Like,
so it reminds me a lot of Mario Lemieux. Like Mario Lemieux was never thought of a fast skater, but because he was 6'6" and lengthy, he had the ability to just turn on jets. And how many times have we seen Mario with a guy draped over his back, right? I remember a goal against the Quebec Nordiques where Norman Rochefort was draped over Mario's back, and Mario skated, basically carrying him through a zone and a half and scoring, right? On run tongue nut, I believe that was. But that goal, although it wasn't Barkov's goal, reminded me a lot of a play that Mario Lemieux would have done. And Barkov has that look, like that tall, lanky, strong forward look that doesn't seem to go fast, but he's flying out there.
All right, I'm stalling, Marty, because I only have 2 stars, and I'm wondering, can you nudge me in a direction of a goaltender that is star worthy right now?
A goaltender that is star worthy right now. I'm gonna look around the National Hockey League. Shesterkin is star worthy, but I do believe that both goaltenders in New York are doing well. Thatcher Demko could be star worthy as well.
He could be. He's not quite there on my list yet. Oh, you know what? I'll go on the blue line instead. I would say this.
Mike Smith is star worthy right now. Back-to-back shutouts.
Yeah, that's another topic for another day. Is did the Oilers finally have it all lining up properly for them to go on a playoff run? But I will say this, just in front of the goaltender, obviously, we have spoke extensively about dynamic performances from the blue line this year. But I would say that most noticeable for me the last 2 weeks, and it's trending the right way, especially after a big win for the Capitals on the road in Denver, John Carlson's play has been very, very noticeably different and better. It's, offensively, he's always had the points, but I've seen just a little bit more urgency and a few more punctuation marks that he's made on plays here of late. So I'll put Carlson in at the 3 spot because he's a real critical piece for Washington if they can climb here in the standings before the regular season winds down. We saw firsthand a guy who's riding the longest active point streak as we record this right now. That's Robert Thomas of the St. Louis Blues. And one of the only reasons I'm mentioning him right now is because we are getting close to the end of the season, which then means draft previews, which means an inevitable reconnecting with our good friend Sam Cosentino at Sportsnet in Canada. And Sammy will always be the guy that I think of when I see Robert Thomas have success, because that year when we ask for later first round picks or sleepers or things like that, he was all over Robert Thomas. And I don't usually remember all these guys that people mention in and around the draft, but the Thomas one really stood out. The Blues grabbed him at 20, and what a pick that has turned out to be. Patience had to be shown, but Thomas is now just absolutely dynamic. And then there's the last one, and hey, you mentioned Huberdeau, and he's been more in the spotlight because he's been in that top 3 for so long, but Johnny Gaudreau, pending unrestricted free agent. Oh my goodness. I have one wish before this regular season ends, and it's for Johnny Gaudreau to steal the Art Ross trophy away from those who are also in the Battle of Alberta. I think what a great storyline. Edmonton, Calgary, and all of a sudden, if Gaudreau could snatch the scoring title from underneath Connor McDavid, wouldn't that be something?
So I think I saw a stat that in the last 25 years, Johnny Gaudreau now has surpassed anybody in even strength points in a season in the last 25 years. So starting in 1997, I think Jagger had 84, McDavid had maybe 84, and Gaudreau now has 85 even strength point, the best even strength season when points in the last 25 years. Amazing.
Yeah, we've talked about it often, like top lines in the NHL. I mean, the Hartman line in Minnesota has been fantastic, but the Gaudreau, Tkachuk, Lindholm, and Calgary, like Marty, it's not even close. It's amazing what their production has been.
It's not even close, and it just goes against my belief that what Daryl Sutter usually is as a coach. Like, it's not about your top line is defensively responsible and nose grinding, and we're going to win this 2-1. I really like what Daryl's done, and he's allowed that line to really blossom and go on the attack, and it's changed Johnny Gaudreau, and it's putting Brad Treliving in a tough position moving forward, the GM of the Calgary Flames, because he has to re-sign Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk this summer. Tkachuk's an RFA, Gaudreau's a UFA, but so their success, well, you know what? Good on Calgary. They're doing great.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch. All right, folks, thanks for joining us on this edition. Ooh, can't stress it enough. Enjoy, savor these moments with RJ's last call season as time is winding down on this campaign, and obviously the Hall of Fame career. Our thanks to Joe Pinter for joining us, and you. We're back again next week on Instigators Overtime, presented by Seneca Resorts and Casinos.